Hello, welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech and more into one place. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor for Escape Collective. Joining me this week,
Ronan McLaughlin, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective.
Hello, Ronan. And who else do we have?
We have me, Alex Hun, also an editor at Escape Collective.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Dave, I'm trying to say hello, but I'm climbing up from all the T47 bottom bracket tools that I have somehow amassed, but yet still don't have the right one to remove the bottom bracket that I'm trying to work on today.
Oh no. You need that modular Pedro's kit that I covered in Threaded a few weeks ago with all the different inserts.
I've had to cut myself off from Threaded for the good of my bank account. But perhaps had I continued with Threaded, my stress levels would be lower this morning. So I'm going to have to maybe find a happy medium.
Yeah, you need one of those safes that go in the freezer for your Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Have you seen these? You can lock your ice cream away for a set period of time. You just need to put your credit card in one of those and just freeze it out and then read Threaded.
Well, I mean, I just completely cracked last night and bought the ceramic speed bottom bracket kit and the extra one that I may or may not need. And I don't even know if that's going to solve my problems, but anyway, every bike that comes in seems like I need a new tool for.
Interesting. What was the one that you didn't have the tool for this time around?
I think it might be a ceramic speed bottom bracket, but it's T47 external, 16 notch. And so I have 16 notches, but not in the right diameter, and I have the right diameter, but in 12 notch. And I've got various versions of each of those, but I don't have a 16 notch 53 mil.
Yep. To understand Ronan's frustration, I'll lead you to an old Threaded article of mine, which I think was called "The Woes of T47," where I basically detailed how many different variations there are and how much of a mess the industry is made of this subject. So yeah, if you have no idea what we're talking about, there is an article that details all of it. But anyway, hopefully you can change that soon.
To explain my stress levels, I have a bikepacking event in 2 weeks, and I'm not confident I'm going to be able to install the bottom bracket before that.
It's not great.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to. Well, we don't want to get into T47 here, but I mean, it also doesn't exactly fix all the problems that it's claimed to. It also creaks. But anyway, that's maybe a different podcast.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's there's no one perfect bottom bracket solution, but I mean, threads aren't necessarily the perfect answer, and yeah, T47 has its own problems. So, but anyway, I think
it's the nicest looking bottom bracket.
The ceramic speed or the T47?
The T47. If I had a aesthetically favorite bottom bracket,
that's a very geeky statement.
Yeah.
Alex, what is the last maintenance / installation thing you wanted to do and didn't have the tool for?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. We're going to touch on it later on, but I'm going to have to do a cockpit swap with one of the bikes I've just received for review. And yeah. I'm intrigued to see how easy that goes. And there may need to be some tools purchased to actually get that swap done without some tears.
If I'm not mistaken, that bike came with an aero seat post that was impossibly long for the size of bike it was on. Did you Did you have the aero cutting guide and everything like that?
No, that is okay. a job for a local outlet.
All right.
Yeah, a local outfit that stocks tools like that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think we found the answer then. Well, we've got plenty to get through. There's been plenty of tire talk, and Unbound is coming up this weekend. So we're going to talk about some tire trends that we're seeing and some big questions that we have and tease of some new answers that we actually have, which sort of fly in the face of what everyone thinks the trend is.
Dave, just say it. Mountain bike tires are not faster.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Testing shows
we'll get to it. We'll get to it. There's a caveat there, but we will get to that. I think we've got a bit of a rant about 3D printed saddles. We're going to have a PSA, and there's also new products. We've got a new bike to talk about, new direct-to-consumer sort of price points, good value road bike to talk about, DT Swiss and Canyon are patent on new suspension. There's other bits and pieces, and of course we'll wrap up the episode with our Ask a Wrench segment for members. Once again, that is Brad Copeland, Mechanic to the Stars, currently at Unbound working with Specialized and the riders there. He joins me to answer a number of member questions. So yeah, stay tuned for that one at the end of the episode. But before we get into all of that, we do have a bit of a corrections corner. I think there's 2 small corrections corners. First one is last week we were talking about Pirelli's new Centrato 55mm endurance road tires, and I think Ronan, you and I sort of joked that it was perhaps the only tire model, performance road tire model, to be available in 28 through to 55mm widths.
We knew we were going to be corrected about that, didn't we?
We did. I even joked that there'd be a corrections corner coming. I just didn't expect it to come with so many messages of how wrong I was. Turns out there are a lot of fans. We knew this. There's a lot of fans for Rene Hurst tires, and each and every one of them commented. So yeah, Rene Hurst does do this. I think they get to claim that they were the first in recent years in this past decade to do a 55mm performance oriented road tire. Yeah, they do still have it. Each width is under a different model name, but they're effectively kind of the same tire. So I think the credit goes to them for being the first to do roadish endurance road tires up to this massive sort of 2.2 inch wide width. So
I think like we need to delve into this more, but I do think maybe Rene Hurst's choice to have a different model name for that vast range of width is probably the better way to do it, because we haven't seen the new Pirellis, but quite often when you go even from like the TLR P0, you get it right up to a 40mm, but the 40mm has a thicker tread cap and has other differences that don't make it exactly the same tire as the 26 or the 28, which is, I think, a fair enough thing to do. But you kind of have to start wondering, like, is it still the same tire? And if you go even further right the way out to 55, it has the same name and it looks the same, but is it still the same tire? I don't know.
It quickly escalates into a crazy level of naming that becomes very, very confusing. And for anyone familiar with like the Maxxis tire range on the mountain bike side, I think will sort of know what I mean. There's just hundreds of different models there with very small variances that trip up even people that work for the company. So it's I think I don't know, naming's tough. I don't know if there's a perfect answer there, but anyway, Rene Hurst has been there, and a note from member Stephen Poole, who I think he had a good little tidbit with this, which is sometimes, depending on if you're on a gravel bike and want road tires, some people might be running say mountain bike wheels on their gravel bikes, and he said this sort of tire width is actually almost required if, say, you're running like a 30mm width mountain bike rim, then you might actually need tires that's up in this 55mm range in order to be ETRTO compliant. So good little reason there for why these tires may exist, beyond other reasons. So
Dave, we promised we wouldn't start talking about ETRTO again. I'm not ready for it. I haven't recovered yet.
We're still okay. We hit our quota a few weeks ago, didn't we? It hasn't quite cleared yet. So anyway, speaking of ETRTO, there's always Zipp. And yeah, we've got a little corrections corner for them. Ronan, what did we need to correct on that one?
Well, I think we had said in last week's podcast that the new 303 SW replaces the previous 303S, and that was incorrect because it replaces the 303 Firecrest.
Yep. And the 303S remains?
Oh God, Dave, don't ask me things that I'm going to have to correct again next week.
Okay.
I don't know.
I haven't seen that. I think they've just left a window open for yet another new wheel at the cheapest price point. But I think if I'm not mistaken, the new range is just the 353 NSW and the 303 SW. 2 wheels instead of 3. Alex is nodding.
Okay. Well, I mean, both the Firecrest and the 303S are still on the Zipp website, but the Firecrest is definitely discontinued. Oh God, how have I dug that hole? How have I dug that hole deeper?
I actually don't know. This is the whole point of Corrections Corner, is that we can correct ourselves and move on. But I think we have not zipped this one up. So, all right,
I was overly focused on other aspects of that article.
Yes,
and that trip.
Yeah, a reminder to anyone that hasn't yet checked out Ronan's article. I mean, there's a lot of coverage on these new wheels, but kudos to Ronan. I think his is sort of the most behind the scenes and perhaps most critical of the decisions that Zipp keeps making here, and it sort of really assesses whether the pressure sensor and yeah, continuation with hookless are the best move for like a performance oriented road wheel.
Can I also just say, like, in the process of being forced to edit my piece down from 12,000 words to the 6,000 that it ended up being, yeah, the introduction of what is new got most of the editing there. So yeah, we had to skip through things where we might otherwise have gone into more detail.
Yep. But anyway, can assure you it's very different to other write-ups on those wheels out there. So check it out. All right, well, I think we're ready to move on to the big topic, and I guess this comes off the back of, we just had a World Cup round in Nove Mesto, where we saw some interesting things from some of the top riders. At the same time, we've also got Unbound, which is kind of the unofficial Gravel World Championships, even though there are official Gravel World Championships. But yeah, we've got Unbound coming up this weekend, and so tyre talk has been a hot topic. At Nove Mesto at the Mountain Bike World Cup in the cross country, we saw prototype/unknown tires from the likes of Vittoria, Maxxis, Pirelli, and Michelin. So quite a lot of brands are doing things and have new models coming out, or at least experimenting. So there's a lot of progress here. But most surprising, and we had seen this a little bit last year, but in the cross country short track, which is kind of like how did you describe it, Alex? Like a criterium on gravel?
Yeah, so gravel crit with jumps.
Yeah. So yeah, with jumps for spectators and TV reasons.
And it's only about 20 minutes long as well.
Yes, yeah. So very, very short, very fast. Only a few man-made technical obstacles typically, and then the rest is sort of wide open for like pack racing. We saw some hot favorites, like we saw Chris Blevins, who ended up winning that day, and Evie Richards as well. We saw both of them on gravel tires in a mountain bike race, and I thought that was quite peculiar. They're like 50 mil width mountain bike tires. Yet at the same time, we're seeing in gravel, the gravel riders are picking mountain bike tires. What's happening here?
I think to begin with, it's just important to clarify the rules around short track riding and why they might be doing this for those that don't watch it. But the rules the rules in cross country mountain biking dictate that you have to use the same bike for short track and the full distance Olympic race. So although swapping to a hardtail would normally make sense for short track, if that isn't conducive to actually the full track on the Sunday, riders just can't do that. One of the only things they can do to make their bike faster and kind of more adapted to the short track is tyre choice. So that's why we're seeing riders experiment more with tyre choice, because it's really the only thing they can do to make the bike more suited to that short crit style of racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably worth noting that unlike in other disciplines, in mountain bike and in cross country, these riders, because they're always racing on in loops and laps, their testing can actually normally be pretty accurate. Like their back-to-back, their ability to do repeatable lap times on the same equipment is pretty impressive. Like they can pretty consistently at this level get within a second or two of repeatable lap times. And it gives them the ability, and I think they've done this over the years. We've seen it with many of the top riders over the years, where they'll do back-to-back blind runs effectively on different wheels and be able to very keenly pick out differences and also be able to see those differences in their lap times. So yeah, I think it is a sort of a unique sport where they don't need to do sort of the level of testing that, say, Ronan would do with an aerometer and all that. They can sort of more consistently pick it out just based on the level that they're riding at and the nature of the courses that they're doing it on. But anyway, Ronan, this comes at pretty good timing, because I know just a day ago you sat down and recorded an episode which I didn't see coming. I didn't know you had planned this.
I didn't know. I had recorded and didn't know what was about to happen.
You sat down thinking you were having a different conversation, and you've managed to get some answers to a question that I kind of failed to answer only a week ago in Ask a Wrench regarding gravel bikes with suspension forks versus big tires, and whether it's faster to be on a skinny tire with a suspension fork and or a rigid fork with a mountain bike tire. And yeah, I wasn't aware of any data out there that really conclusively said one way or the other. A few days later, you show up with some data. What's going on here?
I mean, none of it was my own doing. None of it was my own testing. But I spoke to Mark Gravelin, who he was one of the people behind the No-Show Connect, one of the first aerometer, or one of the first aerometers, certainly commercially available. And he left No-Show in 2019 or 2020, something like that, and has since been working with World Tour teams doing their aero testing and tire testing, and has also been developing his own new drag measurement system. He calls it, kind of affectionately, he calls it the Gizmo, and the Gizmo Lite. They're not commercially available yet, but he does plan to make them available. And he, this year, over 2 different testing blocks, each of them 4 days each, has been working with pro gravel racer Hannah Shell to optimize her setup for onbound. And basically, long story short, yes, they made some aero changes. Yes, they did some aero development and looked at helmets and skin suits and all that. But at some point, they turned their attention to tires. It's sort of forced to run a suspension fork to be able to test mountain bike width tires. They ended up seeing some data that didn't quite make sense. And again, long story short, the more they dug into it, the more they figured out that, yeah, a suspension fork, maybe a better way to put it is the trend towards mountain bike tires on gravel. Maybe a better way to put it is that the trend and the idea that mountain bike tires are faster on gravel doesn't hold up when you've got a suspension fork in the mix. And actually, when you add a suspension fork into the mix, the gravel tires become the fastest option. And so what they've ended up finding through really what I would say is the most in-depth testing I've seen done on this, and really the only testing that I would put any sort of that I would bet my house on. They've found that the mountain bike tire is faster than a gravel tire, speaking in generalities here, if you've got a rigid fork. But once you add in a suspension fork, the gravel tire swings back to being the fastest setup available to them. And that means they're accounting for the weight penalty and the aero drag penalty of the suspension fork.
Yep.
It still ends up net faster.
Yeah, for this rider, optimizing for unbound-ish condition profile, course profile, race scenarios, all that. It's something that you get into. It's a really interesting chat. You have it on the Performance Process channel, which is member only. And I'm going to say this is one of those moments. I was listening and I'm like, this is actually like, if you're into gravel racing or you're into gravel, this is kind of almost like a must listen for me. I think it really was quite enlightening, and it confirmed some things I'd felt previously, like the speed benefit of having a suspension fork on a gravel bike, the efficiency there. But some of these findings that you discussed and the extent to some of the savings sort of even shocked me. Yeah, so some of the numbers that they found, and I guess the savings they found for Hannah were like 20 to 30 watts saving, and she's averaging sort of 220 watts, so significant numbers. And yeah, Mark was sort of pretty confident that that's sort of like the average or even baseline of what he could find in most gravel riders in terms of optimizing them. So I don't know.
There were a few real aha moments or penny dropping moments within it, and I think the overarching takeaway is that riders like Dylan Johnson and Alex Housen that have sort of pioneered mountain bike tires in gravel, and the comparative testing that they would have had to do that sort of has been proved true, that if you look at mountain bike tires versus gravel tires in the exact same setup, then the mountain bike tires would have been faster for many conditions. But if you take a step back and you don't just look at A versus B, you look at the total system and you add in something like a suspension fork, then this testing has brought our understanding to a higher level. And it's not to say that mountain bike tires are wrong in every scenario. Again, there is nuance to the decisions you might make there. There will still be times that you might want to choose mountain bike tires, but I think the learning from this will be that if we publish this before Onbound starts on Saturday morning, there will be a lot of riders standing on the start line thinking, crap, I thought the mountain bike tire was the optimal setup for onbound, and it probably isn't for onbound.
And I think this podcast also gives some insight into like why we see Keegan, for example, lining up with narrow tires and a suspension fork from time to time. I think he's, a little bit ahead of the game in some of these senses, and I think starting to see some science behind it, which I'm sure he will be very unhappy where we're coming to and publishing. So
I mean, the other if we want to know why this is happening, I think it's because when you run a mountain bike tire, you're effectively asking the tire to be your tire and your suspension system. Whereas when you add in a suspension fork, you can let the fork do the suspension work and account for the damping in that, and you can then run the tire that would actually be fastest, and that also extends to tire pressure. So you let the tire take care of that end of the equation and the suspension fork, and so you're separating it out and letting both do their individual jobs rather than trying to use the tire to do both jobs.
All right. Well, yeah, we're definitely not done with this topic. I'd say for anyone that wants to know more, hear the nuance of all this conversation, hear how the testing was done. I found it absolutely fascinating. As I said, if you're into gravel racing, you're into gravel, I truly believe it's a must listen. But yeah, you'll need to be on the Performance Process channel. So
to swing back around though, I think that if we then take that understanding that Hannah and Mark have garnered for us and ask, why are we seeing riders in the short course running gravel tires? Well, they have a suspension fork. And so, it kind of, for that event, you can kind of start to see, if you apply the same thinking, but in the opposite way, it sort of makes sense.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll move us on now, but I am left with the big question. And I'm sure I'm not going to speculate that no one has data on it, because I'm sure by next week you'll record another podcast with someone that answers this, Ronan, is if a narrow tire with a suspension fork is the fastest setup, what does that mean for the rear wheel of a rigid frame?
Well, it was
a
there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of obvious questions leading out of Mark and Hannah's testing, and is a full suspension setup faster again, do you go for a massive rear tire and smaller front? And there are various questions. The other caveat we have to apply is that Hannah is a Pirelli sponsored rider, so they could only test within the Pirelli range, but they had all the Pirelli tires, both gravel and mountain bike, at their disposal. And what they ultimately ended up on was actually, I wasn't surprised by the suspension fork finding, but I was surprised by their ultimate setup, which is going to be a 45 front and a 40 rear. And I would have thought it would have been the other way around, but their testing has shown no.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, check out that podcast. Certainly a topic we're not done with, but I also know a regular contributor to Escape, Kevin Benkenstein out of South Africa. He's penned a full love story of gravel suspension, and he wrote that a few weeks ago, and I think we'll publish that after Unbound. His whole reasoning why he loves suspension, and interestingly, he had sort of justified all of his reasons, but without specific numbers. And Ronan, I think you've filled in those specific numbers now. But it all aligns, and I think it's a story we've got more to say on. But speaking of suspension forks, Alex, you did the Tracker 100 a few weeks back. You were invited by Canyon to ride a new bike that I don't think you're allowed to talk about yet, but it did have on it a suspension fork that you are allowed to talk about now. What is it?
Canyon have partnered with DT Swiss on this to create their own, well, for the time being, their own gravel fork. Okay. They have exclusivity until the end of this year with the F132, which is a catchy name as ever. But Canyon are offering it on the Grail, which is the existing Grail frame. There's no update to the frame in that respect, but it's available in what they call the Rift Edition, which is it stands for Rough is Fast Tuning, which doesn't really make all that much sense as an acronym, but it makes a nice word, so I'm sure that's why they went for it.
It also ties into the Rift race in Iceland, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I immediately thought of Lauf and the Rift race as soon as I saw Rift, because they've, anyway.
So it's a 40mm air-sprung suspension fork. But interestingly, this goes beyond kind of where RockShox and Fox have gone with gravel fork, adding a remote lockout lever to the drops of the bar. To be honest, I found on Tracker, which is about 80% gravel, 20% paved, I didn't reach for the lockout lever once.
Interesting.
It was so wet that most of the time when I did find myself on tarmac, I was just trying to get grit out of my eyes, and I wasn't thinking too much about locking out a fork for a little bit of efficiency savings. I was really impressed by how plush the fork felt in comparison to kind of like a 50+ mil gravel tyre setup with low pressure. Having an actual active damped suspension unit really did make a difference, especially on the more technical sections of gravel. Yep. I don't think Canyon would have seen the research that you were just talking about, Ronan, but somehow, unknowingly, they appear to have made the right approach by stocking the bike with a 40 mil tyre with a suspension fork, which I think for most people, before they listen to this podcast, they would have questioned why you would go for a suspension fork and then not maximise the tyre it would accept. But apparently this could actually be an accidental strike of gold.
Yeah, they've tripped over and fallen in the genius bucket. So it's... I think, the fork's interesting to me because it kind of reminds me of like real old XC suspension forks, like old school RockShox Sid, which had dual chamber adjustable air spring. So if I'm not mistaken, this one has both like adjustable positive and negative chamber, which gives you a lot more tunability over what that air spring is doing versus most of the other gravel forks on the market. It looks good. Like you have these removable mounts, the ability to like put things on the fork legs as well. I think it's an interesting fork.
The only thing that concerns me, especially if it does become available on more bikes after 2025, when Canyon lose the exclusivity to it, at least in the UK, I believe getting the fork fully overhauled will mean sending it back to DT Swiss. I don't think there are any service centres at the minute that deal with the DT Swiss F132 fork.
It's similar in Australia. There's very few specialists in DT Swiss suspension, and it can be harder to get parts and all that for that brand of suspension. But
it's also a shame to see that the interim servicing, the kind of lower leg service if you're a mountain biker, that has stayed at a fairly typical 50 hours, which on a mountain bike, I don't think too many people are that fussed about, but considering a weekend of racing might total 10 hours, the service intervals on this fork.
If you're Ronan, that's just one ride.
So, that's something just to bear in mind with gravel suspension, is the servicing that also comes with it.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, I think, it sounds like we'll have a few articles on the topic of gravel suspension coming up. So,
I don't want to take us back to the original conversation here, but like I wrapped up the article. I do want to, but I know you don't want me to, so I have to pretend that I don't want to, but I actually do want to.
All right. I see how this is. Go on.
It's called being polite, I think, but I'm not very good at that. So, I wrapped up the written article that I've done on this testing by Mark and Hannah by saying that frame manufacturers have found themselves sort of clamoring to accommodate the mountain bike tire widths that gravel racers have been demanding over the past couple of years, and that does come with compromises. This is one space you can't have your cake and eat it, and it just kind of, when you guys were talking there, it kind of reminded me, like, it is so easy to criticize a spec choice, but sometimes we don't have all the information available. Like the new Trek Checkmate got ridiculed last year because it didn't have clearance for 50 mil tires. And that's still a review I'm trying to finish up, but that's a bike that I very, very, very much enjoyed riding. And I think
turns out it's the most modern road bike on the market.
Well, what I was going to say is, accommodating mountain bike tires, I'm not sure if there would have been compromises that would have made that not as nice a bike to ride. And the same thing here. We would be quick to assume, 40 mil tire on a suspension fork is just ludicrous, but actually, it may well make sense. I'm not saying it was the right choice, but I'm just saying there is nuance to all these decisions. And I'm not saying also that Canyon knew that when they were making the choice, but
yeah. Anyway, clearly remains a topic of interest for us, and I hope for our listeners too. Anyway, let's move on to something else for this week. I think there's been a bit of a mutual rant happening, a mutual dislike of a certain type of saddle. So, Alex, I might let you introduce this one. What are we talking about?
We're talking about 3D printed saddles. And I think this might come as a shock to a lot of people because at least if you go to the brands that make them and you read the marketing material, they make a lot of claims for increasing comfort and they make a lot of claims. But I think arguably if you have used them, especially for any prolonged period of time, there are actually a lot of unspoken downsides that make what is often a saddle that is many hundreds of dollars or euros.
Yeah.
Quite a difficult investment to justify. It's a product that for some people, it may have a genuine benefit, especially if you do have long-term issues with finding a saddle that works for you and you've tried multiple brands. Maybe trying the variable density of a 3D printed saddle might offer some relief, but I think if you see a 3D printed saddle as a nice bit of kind of high tech to put on your bike, there are things to be aware of before opening your wallet and spending an unholy amount of money on a saddle.
I had this on your mind list of things to discuss, and that's because I, like many, was very impressed with the initial sensation of extra comfort that you get from a 3D printed saddle.
They do feel lovely on first contact.
Definitely, and caveat this with having only used the Specialized S-Works Roman Evo and the Celitalia SLR 3D. I think we're being tricked with that initial sense of comfort. And I have decided I don't get along with either of those saddles.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you why in a second, but I will just caveat this by saying I know there are hundreds of people, probably many listening now, that are screaming at us saying the 3D printed saddle I have on my bike is the most comfortable thing I've ever sat on, and for hours I can ride comfortably. I've never had that sort of experience before. I know this is a very common experience of people, and I'm just going to say I am at least well aware of people loving these things and swearing by them, but there are, what Alex hinted at before, there are actual real downsides to these, and given what they cost, I think they're legitimate downsides. But Ronan, why haven't you got on with those two saddles?
Most comfortable saddle you've ever sat on does not mean that you've sat on every saddle.
Correct.
So there could be more comfortable out there.
Correct.
So just keep that in mind if you are a proponent of 3D printed saddles.
This is the same psychology as to why I keep buying hex keys.
Yeah, it's only the best is only the best you've tried so far. Yeah, I mean, joking aside, yeah, saddles. Another on your mind I've had in my list is that we've said for years that saddles are individual and what works for one person doesn't for another, and I more and more think that is not entirely true. Yes, there is obviously some element of that, but I think a well-designed saddle, which I can explain if you want, will work for many more people than we currently assume. We currently sit on the other side where it's like impossible that one saddle can work for everybody, and I think one saddle made well probably could work for the vast majority of people, put it that way. But I don't get on with the Roman Evo because I find that it very quickly starts to sag, and I know that a lot of people seem to have issues with it degrading very, very quickly, and yeah, that's not good when you look at the price of these things. And then the Celitalia one, again, sat on it, initially felt the comfort, also felt like a real strong sense of like being planted in the saddle, and it like helps you just sit in position very well. There's like a bit of grip to it, and over like short rides, yeah, definitely got on very, very well with it. But having upped the mileage recently, and you know, upped the mileage on saddles before this and never had an issue, but upped the mileage recently on this saddle, and that sense of sort of grip very quickly leads to pressure points, and I, for the first time in years, have been getting saddle sores. And lo and behold, I swapped the saddle and increased the mileage further, and no issue. I'm not going to say 3D printed isn't the right direction to go in. There could well be potential there, but what I still see when I look at many of these saddles is that the fundamentals of what I believe would make a good saddle are missing, and the 3D printed has been held up as this almighty solution that, you know, like most things,
benchmark worth paying for.
Yeah, but if the fundamentals aren't in place, which to me are a saddle that, you know, has and again, I think this would work for most people, has not just a cutout, but a cutout through the nose. And so you can rotate forward without build up of pressure and soft tissue. And yeah, just a saddle that kind of supports the rider in an anteriorly rotated pelvic position. And there will be those, think like Philip Gilbert always liked the nose of the saddle up, and that sort of locked his hips in place. But I think that's accommodating for, I was the type of rider who always rode nose up as well to get that sense of security and pelvic stability. But I think that was making up for issues elsewhere. And actually, when you correct those issues, you can then ride in a more anterior rotated pelvis position, which is just naturally more efficient, going to be more comfortable. You're not asking your back to like bend forward, you're rotating your entire upper body forward, which is just going to be better. You can go too far with that and you end up adding pressure onto your wrists and that, but yeah, I'm going to stop talking now.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull you away from the bike fit fundamentals. But Alex, I mean, you certainly have some strong thoughts on this. So I think there's two key things here that really bug you with 3D printed saddles, and particularly again when you consider the cost of these. So what are those two things?
Well, I think following on from Ronan's points, like I've liked Pro Logo's saddles with CPC because I've liked that kind of grippy top feeling that kind of holds you in place more than just like a regular saddle. I think especially the Physique Adaptive that I've used recently, that just took things too far. So when it came to adjusting my position on the bike, I literally had to fully unweight myself from the saddle to shuffle around, which then makes getting the right position very hard to be precise with, because you're kind of plonking yourself back on the saddle rather than just sliding around to find exactly where you want to be.
It's like a 510 on a mountain bike pedal.
Exactly that.
Niche reference that one part of the audience won't understand with the other part. But anyway.
One part of the podcast doesn't understand.
My biggest gripe with most 3D printed saddles, how they're made right now and how the open design of them. Especially, we're looking at the Physique Adaptive. I had the custom made one. It's over $500. It's already a lot of money and a lot of effort's gone into getting that made for you. You're going to have to, through my experience at least, you're going to have to factor in at least 2, maybe 3 pairs of bib shorts a year, because the open design of the saddle, especially if you ride in the wet, that just acts as a sandpaper and a braiding surface. But yeah, so I didn't have the same issue with the Physique that Ronan mentioned with the Ronan, where it started to sag. The Physique held up really well for the months I rode it, but it sounds like instead of the saddle degrading, it just moved the issue to my bib shorts. And within, I think it was about 10 weeks of riding with the saddle, my winter shorts were through to the chamois. So, it's not just the cost of the saddle. There is genuine associated cost further down the line if you're going to invest in a saddle like this.
And that goes back to Ronan's, like that is also friction, right? So is potentially causing some sort of abrasion to yourself as well, and perhaps increasing the likelihood of saddle sores and all that. The other thing that I've certainly seen in the market is just a lack of durability in the saddles. So I haven't seen it really confirmed anywhere, but I mean I've personally experienced where this is on a Specialized saddle where the material started to break down, and the answer came from Specialized saying we've discovered that some chemicals in certain chamois creams are reacting with the material, and so you've got to avoid these certain chamois creams. Again, yes, these external things, unforeseen problems exist, and but I think given what these saddles cost, I mean they need to be durable. You can't be replacing these saddles every 12 months to 18 months, and no matter how comfortable they are, when they're this expensive, they need to last.
Yeah, I think if you're charging more, and in most cases, close to double what you'd pay for a non-3D print version, you can't be making it worse in ways people will be using it. If there's some extreme, very limited use cases where there are issues, perhaps that can be more excused by answers like that. But for something that, a very average rider will be doing, I don't think that you can justify the price of a 3D printed saddle whilst it's restricting how you can use it.
I think the next step with these saddles, I think the technology is really interesting. I think there is scope for the technology to continue. And I think what I've seen on a few pro bikes, sort of like unreleased saddles, I think is going to be the next step will be like 3D printed, but without the exposed material. Because I think that exposed material is almost like a marketing gimmick to show you what it is. But I think what we're seeing is like there is real benefit to covering it with a smooth, more slippery cover. And I think we'll probably see that in the next generation, at least in high friction zones. That these things will have smooth surfaces. But
yeah, I think it's a bit like radars in that one company has come out with it first and done really, really well off the back of it, and now we're seeing many other brands follow suit. Yeah, and in this case, I'm not even sure that the original was getting it all that right, whereas Garmin did get the original radar right, partly because they had acquired the original movers into that space, so they had a massive head start. But yeah, like I appreciate as well that there might be a lot of people screaming at their headphones, disagreeing with everything I just said. I obviously cannot swap my undercarriage in with somebody else's and test how it might work for them. I'll look into it. I haven't to be honest, I haven't properly researched whether that's possible or not. But I still
bracket.
I still like a move to covering the 3D printed material might help here, but again, I just go back to the fundamentals of a saddle, and I would much rather see saddles that focus on those, and once they've perfected that, then move on to the 3D printed materials or covers or whatever else comes next.
Anyway, I'm going to move us on, but I will put a call out for anyone that's listening that loves their 3D printed saddle. I know there are many of you. They are, extremely comfortable for some people, and I guess what I'm keen to hear is like, whether you have experienced the issues we spoke about in terms of durability or wear on your shorts, or whether you think we're full of crap and that you haven't seen any of that and that you're on a 3 or 4 year old 3D printed saddle at this point with no issues. I am keen to hear that. So
should I give the example of the rider I know who swore how great his 3D printed saddle was, but also in the same sentence complained about the saddle sores he had?
I think you just did.
Okay.
All right, it's time for a quick PSA. This week, it's just a reminder that if you're on wireless shifting, check your batteries. Some of them last a year, some of them last up to 2 years, some of them don't even last that long. But yeah, regardless of whether you're on, say, Shimano Road or SRAM Wireless, or perhaps even newer Campagnolo, check your batteries.
You're not talking about the derailleur batteries. You're talking about the shifter lever
I'm talking
batteries.
About specifically the shifter batteries, because the derailleur batteries everyone remembers to charge, but it's the shifter batteries that go a long time that you just forget about. So, so for Shimano Di2, if you're on like newer 12-speed stuff, you can check there's actually a little LED in the shifter that most people don't know about, and you can actually see it by pushing both shift buttons at the same time. And that'll illuminate the LED, and then you follow the same light protocol as you would for the main battery. So green is good, red is bad, and yeah, that's one to know. And then on SRAM, it's just you push the shift button, and you'll see a light on the opposite side of the paddle, and that'll tell you whether that shift button's good.
I think this is a good reason to have your grip set connected to your head unit if you have that functionality, because your head unit will warn you also if the derailleur batteries are dying, which is much more frequent, but because it's more infrequent, we often forget about the shifter lever batteries, and I've had a head unit screaming at me for about 3 weeks that the shifter battery is dead, and I've been pushing my luck. I know it is running low, but I wouldn't probably have thought about that had I not been getting the message on my head unit.
You're about to have a very expensive single speed for a ride.
Yeah, it happens to everybody at some point.
Yeah. Fun tip with that, if you have, so like SRAM shifters use a 2032 battery, and if you have a Quark power meter on your bike, chances are that's also being powered by that same battery. And so,
Dave, would you rather have no gears or no power? Come on, you're going to take power every day then.
Interesting take on that scenario. But yeah, anyway, you might, if you're on a SRAM bike, full SRAM bike, like with a new power meter, you might end up having a spare battery to use in case you end up with a dead shifter. And if you're crazy enough to do a bike packing trip like Ronan's currently planning, then be sure to pack a spare coin cell battery or two just in case. But all right, that was a quick one. Let's move on to some quick tech bites for the week. We've already spoken about the DT Swiss suspension fork. So yeah, if you want to hear more about that, you can find it in our daily news on the websites. Also new, Alex, you've been busy with this one. Polygon have updated the Helios A, which is was kind of like a well-rounded, almost like Cervelo Caledonia-ish style performance road bike, but they've done something to it. It's no longer that. What have they done?
Yeah, so you reviewed this bike. I think it was either last year or the year before, and
yeah, a couple
instead
of years,
of just instead of just updating it a little bit and kind of moving it along, keeping it in line with current trends, they've taken the Helios A and they've moved it in a completely different direction. The press material might call it a race/endurance bike. The endurance can definitely be crossed out, and we can just call it a race bike, because compared to the Helios it replaces, it has become considerably longer and lower. It's a very racy feeling bike, and looking at the geometry chart, that is the case across the whole size range.
If I'm not mistaken, I think they removed 30 mil of stack across the size range. Is it 30?
For the size I've got, yes. And with it next to the Scott Addict, I also have in for review, even with 30 mil of spaces under the stem on the Helios, the bars are still a good 1.5 centimeters, 2 centimeters lower than the Addict. So compared to what is already considered a racy bike, this seems to have taken it potentially too far, I would say, for what most people will be looking for.
Yeah, I did review the previous version. I actually praised the geometry, stating that it was like kind of a really well-balanced, performance-oriented road bike, but the geometry made a lot of sense for like a value-oriented, mostly consumer direct bike that it is. It's like for the most people buying this bike, they're not necessarily going to be racing. They're just going to want like a fast looking bike, and they're going to be buying it sight unseen, never having test ridden it. And that sort of middle of the road bike geometry made a lot of sense for this bike. I did remark that they got things like the stem length wrong, that they had the handlebar length wrong. It was a one-piece cockpit. I think they'd done something silly with the seat post length. I remarked on all of that, but it seems like all the things I complained about they didn't fix, and the one thing I praised, they ruined.
Yes, I would say that's an accurate description of where the Helios has headed. I think one thing that is beneficial compared to the other one is they've moved away from the one-piece bar and stem. They've gone to a more traditional two-piece, so the cockpit is still wrong. The stem length and handlebar width are standard. I think most people are probably going to want to size down both. The size small I got came with a 400mm bar, and I think it was 110mm stem. I'm just trying to bring that up now, but given how long and low the frame already is, it's definitely something I'm going to be looking to swap, just to bring it more in line with what I would want from a racy feeling bike. Because as much as I like to be in a fairly aggressive position, I don't like my nose to be on the tire.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting. Like, I'm getting to an age where I like my stack nice and tall, but you're still your personal bike is a Tarmac SL8 with a longer stem than what it comes stock with, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So the standard 52 comes with a 90mm stem, and I've got 100 on there, so just a little bit longer.
All right, so not massively different. Okay, but still, yeah, I mean, you're used to riding a race bike, so yeah, you're coming at it from a performance point of view. I think, yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting bike, Polygon. I mean, we called it in again because they are such incredibly good value for money in some markets, predominantly in Australia and the USA, where they're sold by an online store called Bikes Online. And they really go after like just that price. They really attack the price point, and yeah, some of the models are really well spec'd for not huge money.
It like 105 Di2 with carbon wheels for $4,000, and the Ultegra model without a power meter is 4,800 for the Ultegra model. So
there you go. Yep. So yeah, there were reasons why we were keen to review this, but yeah, I don't know. I think you haven't reviewed it yet. We've got a info review article up on the site, but yeah.
One of the reasons I haven't reviewed it, haven't really started reviewing it yet, is how the bike arrived to me, especially the seat post. We kind of alluded to it in the intro, but I went for a size small, which I'm 172 centimeters. The sizing range Polygon provides say that the small is good for up to 174 centimeters. But the minimum saddle height you can run with the seat post as it is sent to you is just over 75 centimeters to the bottom bracket, which I think for pretty much anyone, unless you've got like especially long legs, that's going to be too long for you, and you're going to actually need to cut the seat post down to get it to fit into the frame, which I know isn't an issue that is new, but considering it's for everyone in the size range, that's going to probably be unusual and an unexpected trip to either a bike shop or somewhere to get a cutting guide for an aero seat post will be needed.
Yeah, I think the seat post is sort of quite telling. Like, I mean, this is a consumer direct company in a lot of markets, and yeah, they go to a lot of effort of the packaging of the bike and, you know, how easy it is to assemble at your end, and the requirement to then have a customer go and get a carbon seat post cut is, I think, sort of shows that there's still room for improvement. But anyway, we'll come back to this bike in the next few months as you get some time on it, as you get it set up, and we'll have the review in future. But a price point bike that's at least interesting on paper. But cool. All right, well, yeah, there's two other little bits of tech, and I think they're both Unbound related. The first one, quick one, is from Goodyear. They've updated their connector series of tires. They now have a whole new race line, which gets like whole new casing, a race casing, with new tread compounds. They're claiming, significant savings in terms of rolling resistance, improvement in grip, and reduction in weight. Some of the models are claiming to be to cut rolling resistance by 50% compared to the models that they're replacing, which almost feels too good to be true. Either that or it's scary of how slow the previous versions might have been. But yeah, there's 3 versions. So there's the Slick Race, the Speed Race, and the Inter Race, which get sort of branding that now fits in line with the Goodyear tires that exist for Zipp's wheels. It's the Slick Race is obviously more of a road endurance road tire, and the Inter Race is sort of like at the opposite end of more made for loose surfaces, and sort of looks like a proper knobby gravel tire. They're not all available in all the same widths. The Slick Race is sort of just limited to 40. The Speed Race, I think, is 40 and 45, and then the Inter Race is 40 through to 50 mil sizes. But interesting enough. One I'm hoping to get some time on in the near future. I think that Inter Race looks like it'll be a good fit for our conditions, so hoping to get some time on that 50 mil.
Just on that, like, obviously Goodyear were present at that Zipp launch that I was at as well, and I'm kind of, having spoke with the people at Goodyear at length there, they're making a lot of I don't know how to put this without having actually tested the tires, but they're clearly making a big effort in terms of the new product coming to market, and quite a lot of it is quite, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but I'm certainly seeing more and more product come from Goodyear that I'm paying more and more attention to.
They're really invested in it.
Yeah, and James obviously visited their factory last year. There's a piece on Escape Collective inside a tire factory and how the tires are made there, and that was kind of enlightening in points as well.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've had pretty good experiences with Goodyear in recent time. I wouldn't say they're necessarily my top pick as of yet. I still think there's some tires that are still managing to find the balance between like grip and puncture resistance and speed a little bit better, but I mean, they're getting up there. I mean, they're certainly edging up into the top 5, so I think it's one to watch.
Like, so much of that trip for me was like just this, two sides of my brain trying to compute conflicting views on hookless and this, that, and the other, and also on just like the fitment series that's up in Goodyear now have. But when you speak to the people at Goodyear and hear about some of the thinking behind what's effectively like a homologated tire and some of the benefits that may well bring it, as I said in that article, it makes sense that considering wheel and tire as a single package unlock like a new frontier or whatever in performance, and I think not specifically to Zipp, but just the explanations and the thinking behind that Goodyear offered sort of suggested to me that this is maybe a tire brand that is going to be at the moment, they're not on a world tour team, and I think that's probably what's keeping them out of most people's minds. I think if they were on a world tour team and winning world tour races, we might be seeing them.
Human-powered health in the women's last year.
Not last year, yes, not this year.
Not this year. Yeah. So Anyway, I think it's a brand to watch. I'm not gonna claim that they're quite there yet, but yeah, I'm certainly keen to spend more time on these latest gravel tires. So, speaking of gravel wheels and things, Head has been very busy in the space, and they've got 2 new wheels releasing just in time for Unbound. There's the Stillwater G50 and the Lincoln G25. So the G50 stands for 50mm depth. The G25 stands for 25mm depth, so nice and shallow. Both have a 28.5mm internal inner width, so pushing out that width quite a bit for wider tires. 36mm external widths, a new 36-tooth ratchet-based hub, and yeah, they look nice.
Dave, can I confuse you?
Yeah, please.
I don't know why these rims are hooked.
Yep.
I think these should be hookless.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been testing a wheel that I feel the same way. It's hooked, and I'm not sure why. So, which I'll be able to talk about in a week's time. But I think I agree. I think you and I don't mind that they're hooked, but I think to confuse people, our issue with hookless is strictly limited to the use in road, where narrow tires and higher pressures still make sense. For off-road applications, I think you and I and Alex, feel free to correct me, but zero issues with hookless in those in off-road applications. So
when it's done right, in line
when
with
it's done right.
Current standards, which may not be perfect, but they're currently what we have.
Sure. I'd say for a gravel wheel, these are sort of pushing the width a little bit, so they're really forcing a wider tire, but there are some gravel wheels where I still like to have hooks for the ability to run narrow road tires at times on those same wheels. I don't think these wheels are that example, but that might be one reason that they're thinking. But anyway, yeah, nice to see Head still doing things, and they clearly have their eyes set on the gravel scene in the US. All right, well that's almost it for this week. It's just about time to head into Ask a Wrench. So if you're on the free feed and you've made it this far, then thanks for tuning in. But you will need to become a member of Escape Collective in order to keep listening and to hear all the goodness of Brad and I answering questions related to keeping older 11-speed SRAM road group sets going. There's a question about sort of pondering whether there's like a rear equivalent to the trail figure when it comes to the rear handling of a bike. It's an interesting question. And we also answer a question about traveling with a bike equipped with SRAM transmission T-Type derailleurs. Which is also the recommendations in that are equally applicable to new SRAM Explore equipped bikes. So, yeah, if you want to hear that, then stay logged in or log into the member feed, and you'll be able to hear all of that.
God, Dave, I want to hear that. Can we just play it now?
We will be playing it now, right now.
The rear trail is something I've been discussing a bit, and then I just hadn't considered that there might be a difference for traveling with an Explorer derailleur. Well, actually, you just said no. Well, let's not spoil it. Anyway, yeah.
The rear trail, I'm interested to talk to you about. We might have to do this off mic straight away, and who knows? Maybe I need to edit what we've answered in the next section. But we'll continue that conversation, Ren. All right.
Let's get off mic quickly then.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah. Alex, Ronan, good to see you. And until next week. Cheers.
This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Will Jones at Red Bricks Media.